Hello. Today I will be featuring a much requested ship, the Yorck, the German Tier 7 cruiser. This ship used to be straight up awful, but it has actually been buffed quite a bit in some, well, it was actually a few patches ago, since they buffed it fairly quickly after it was released, because obviously people were not enjoying it. Now, it's still a bit of an odd ship compared to the rest of the German line, considering most of the other German line is all about spamming AP. You have your, well, basically starting at the Königsberg, you spam AP. Nuremberg, well, because you end up so much against T7 and such, and T8, you kinda end up spamming a bit of HE, but you're mostly an AP cruiser in them as well. And at first glance, the Yorck looks like just another AP German cruiser, because once again the AP does significantly more damage than the HE. But the Yorck is actually not supposed to be played like that. You don't get the maximal efficiency out of the ship if you even attempt to play it as a normal German cruiser. Instead, it's actually played more like a Cleveland. You might even say Cleveland, or perhaps a Mogami. You want to focus mostly on HE. A long-range HE spam pretty much becomes your friend in this ship. Now, the HP pool is of course a bit of a question. The Yorck Citadel can be fairly trollish, so you don't actually eat that many random citadels as you do in, let's say, the Shores or the Pensacola or other notoriously extremely squishy ships. So you're a bit more protected than they are. But the main issue with this ship is obviously that the air drag on your AP shells is insane. Even though it says that the shell velocity is the same on the shells, the AP shells actually have significantly more drag, which means they slow down a lot in air. In fact, looking at the shells, they have something like 900 meters per second shell velocity, which makes you think, wow, this is like Zao shells. But that's not the case at all. They just slow down so much in midair that the only time you can really efficiently use AP is sub 10 kilometers, if even then. So obviously, most of your goal is going to be using HE. Now, you can buff the HE fairly well. I mean, you want Demolition Expert, which is something I of course recommend on German cruisers to begin with. But when you get Demolition Expert on these shells, you actually end up becoming a fairly decent fire starter. Also because the shells are bigger than what you had in the Nuremberg or the Königsberg, the HE shells in general tend to do more damage as well. So if it plays like an HE spammer, and it's not necessarily that bad at it, because you actually have a very, very good range in this ship. I think it was 17.3 kilometers range or something. Now, hitting something at these extreme ranges is going to be rather tricky unless you're basically shooting battleships. But the range, of course, makes life significantly easier when it comes to setting alight battleships, especially, since those are by far the easiest targets for you to hit and farm damage and experience on. You are quite strong close range. Of course, you still have the German double torpedo setup, which means at close range you can obviously delete quite a lot of battleships and pretty much anything. But you shouldn't really rely on it, and in general you shouldn't even push up to try to rely on it. Now, in fact, you might see that I'm not even using hydroacoustic surge on this ship, even though I really love the German hydroacoustic surge. But the simple reason is that you don't really want to get into those close quarters brawling fights unless you absolutely have to, and even then it's usually against battleships and such that you want to get into those close fights. In general, the playstyle of the ship is what I'm showing you here. Is you take a somewhat ranged position and you just HE spam 24/7 at everything. I picked this game in particular because this is the T6 to T8 bracket, so it's pretty much the average of what you'll end up. Some ships are lower tier than you, some are higher, some are the same, so you get a bit of everything in this commentary. Now, even though I said the Citadel can be a bit trickier to hit, of course if you still get broadside you can get Citadel, especially if it's a battleship shooting you. But it's a fairly well handling ship, and in fact it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. In fact, I'd say it's quite efficient at what it does these days. I mean, it's never going to be as fun as some others, but the fire chance on these shells is actually quite high. and the reload isn't that bad either, so you end up being able to farm a significant amount of damage on the ship. I think I'm averaging like 70-80k, somewhere around that, which for a T7 cruiser isn't bad at all. And I've been staying fairly faithful to this normal playstyle. Of course, every now and then you get this insane YOLO clip when you happen to end up in a brawling fight and for some reason the battleships don't instantly delete you and you end up being able to use all your torps, and you can launch 6 torps per side, so you just get this ridiculous damage with torpedoes. But these games are of course anomalies, and trying to count on that always happening and trying to get every game to be one of those torp YOLO fests is just silly. I mean, rushing in and trying to get those perfect torps on someone, well, it's hilarious when it happens. Most of the time, if the battleship has any idea what he's doing, he's going to absolutely demolish you. This guy already starting to focus me. I'm of course angling in towards him, and as soon as he shoots, I turn into him just to dodge the shells. I'm not expecting to bounce them, but I'm hoping to dodge them by making my profile as small as possible. You saw I launched my torps already, 6km range. I saved one extra volley, I just launched one of them, and it's going to prove to be enough to secure the kill. Well, he didn't have much HP left anyway. Cleveland left now, and this is the range where the AP becomes viable. It still struggles a bit at this range. I mean, that is really how much of a power it loses at any sort of range, but this is the range where it starts to become useful. I take a pretty big lead because I expected him to be moving faster, but he's actually moving extremely slowly, it seems. Same closer to the middle. I'm hoping to get those citadel hits so the German AP can really shine, but I'm just getting a lot of overpens right now. On Cleveland's in general, both HE and AP work just as well, because Cleveland has very squishy armor, which means HE does a lot of damage. But there you saw 4 overpens, but one at least citadel. Will I even get this kill? Is someone gonna take it? Someone took it faster. You saw how much how the shells basically flew past mine in midair, and I think it was a Hatsuhara or something shooting. They just flew past mine, made it before mine did. That's because those AP shells, they just have so much air drag that that's what makes them very tough to use at any sort of range. It can be quite nice when you see battleships showing broadside. If you're at somewhat close range, you switch to AP and you start shooting the superstructure, especially against German battleships that you tend to have fairly squishy superstructure, and you can just farm damage on them. But most of the time, HE is really the way to go in this ship. And I mean, the anti-air, it's decent. It's not something special. Of course, the crown will always be the German hydroacoustic surge, but even though this commentary in particular will show a different point of view. Whoa! I think this replay is glitching out a bit. I forgot to have my recording on while I was playing this game, so I just loaded up the replay. Looks like it's glitching out a bit. I'm telling these Tirpitzus on our right to move in because they're full HP, and basically the only thing they have achieved so far is they sailed down to A, they turned around because there were enemies there, and then they sailed all the way through our base, all the way back to C. That's what they've been doing the last like half of this game. Well, 9 minutes into a 20-minute game. So I'm trying to tell them to finally like be useful and go into B and use that full HP pool to something good. Here of course comes the point I was making about having this 17.3km range. It's pretty good against battleships, but trying to land shells on a cruiser, you can see the travel time there, 11 seconds to hit to this range, and 11 seconds for a cruiser is a lot of time for them to change course and maneuver and all of this. So it's going to be rough landing those hits, and certainly not something I would count on. Now I'm pretty sure there's a DD somewhere here, so that's why I'm angling in here. Oh wow, the Mutsuki actually allowed himself to get spotted. That was a pretty big mistake by him. Once again, oh, he missed. Well, I actually managed to get the kill. But whenever you see another person shoot next to you, you always get an idea of just how slow your shells are and how much they slow down in midair. It's kind of humorous. Yorck, switching to HE. One thing that the Yorck does have, which is kind of I feel a remnant of the days of the Karlsruhe, is that HE shells to the middle, basically to the citadel part of the ship, tend to disable the engine surprisingly often. And I think that's something that's been left over since back in the day the Karlsruhe used to lose engine all the time because of this. But yeah, you see that? HE shell broke his engine. And this is a bit more common than on any other cruiser. In fact, usually on a cruiser at this tier, if you lose engine, it's because you got citadeled. But the Yorck tends to lose engine quite a bit just from HE shells, which is very surprising. And it's something that must be pointed out because obviously that makes using the module that reduces the risk of, well, and there my engine broke because of his HE to the midsection. So it certainly makes using the module that reduces the chance of your engine braking much more viable on this ship than any other. Usually on cruisers you want to be using the rudder shift module because HE shells to the back of your ship, and in a cruiser you tend to take quite a lot of those since you turn around and kite enemies and then you get shot as you kite them, so losing rudder is something that happens quite often. But on the Yorck, instead of using the rudder module, that's certainly a valid point to using the engine module as well. Now here I'm actually showing one of the more positive aspects of these floaty shells, namely you can utilize land cover extremely well, because you can arc your shells over just about anything. Very Atlanta-esque or even Cleveland-esque, that it plays in very much the same way. And once again, this is a bit of a odd ship because these shell arcs, you don't have shell arcs like this on the next ship, on the Hipper, and you don't have shell arcs like this on the previous ship, the Nuremberg. And I feel this is one of the main reasons why people struggle so much with this ship, is because it's such a it's not a step back or forward in any way, it's more like a step sideways in the line. It just like deviates into this weird ship that is the Yorck, and then it feels like it goes back on track when you get into the Hipper again. So this ship, that's why a lot of people like have issues with this ship in particular, because you just get this completely different playstyle all of a sudden, and these completely different shells and gun characteristics, and pretty much everything is just strange about the ship compared to any other German cruiser. So that's why it's quite awkward for many people to adapt to it. But if you take this, if you pretend like you're in a Cleveland and play it like such, then I'm pretty sure you will have a much more successful game. And unlike the Cleveland, you of course have the close range, extremely potent torps. I mean, well, each torp doesn't exactly do insane damage or anything, but it's the fact that you have 2 launchers on both sides and you can launch a total of 6 torps per side, which is a lot for a cruiser. Let's see, can I land that shell? Got some good hits on that Fubuki. I'm gonna go pick a fight with this Dunkirk. And of course, getting into these extremely close range fights with battleships, when you don't have to close the distance in the open, but you actually can come around corners like this. This is where the Yorck of course shines, because, well, any German cruiser kinda shines, except for Nuremberg and the Königsberg, because they are so extremely squishy with the citadel. But especially the Yorck shines here, because you can get those torpedo volleys off. I'm turning hard left, of course, because I'm expecting him to shoot. Bounced most of it, but then again, this is a Dunkirk shooting, so I mean, bouncing Dunkirk shells, it's kind of like winning the Special Olympics. Okay, that was very rude. I'll take that back, sorry. But yeah, bouncing Dunkirk shells is extremely easy, and you can do it quite comfortably in the Yorck, because Dunkirk shells don't exactly have the best penetration. I wouldn't be doing the same thing against Nagata shells, for sure. Or Colorado shells, for that matter. Those things hurt. Not bothering with any torps on this guy. Fubuki is taking pot shots at me. Yeah, I'm not gonna get that kill. Fubuki is taking pot shots at me and pushing into C. He obviously wants to secure C, so I'm just gonna give chase. Now, this is one of those cases where Hydra would have of course been amazing. German Hydra would absolutely be 10 out of 10 in this situation, but you can manage against DDs without Hydra, simply because, well, you're a cruiser. So you should be able to utilize your maneuverability to survive without issues. And in general, you've seen how often I've actually been fighting DDs here. It's mostly because I was the first man into B. That's why I fought 1 DD. But other than that, I've pretty much never been in the forefront, which is why I run defensive AA instead. Because you spend so much time further back, you're also where aircraft carriers most likely are to strike against your battleships, and you're, in my opinion, able to provide a better utility for your team with defensive AA than you are with hydroacoustic search. But of course, in this case, pushing into a Fubuki that's in a smoke, having Hydra would of course be fantastic. In fact, I think both are viable. I'm not saying one is better than the other, because of course German Hydra is known for having its especially long ranges of detection, so it's certainly also a very strong option. I personally prefer the defensive AA instead, because I feel this tier 7 has a lot of carriers usually. You tend to, either you get up, you fight up, if you get up tier, you fight against Shikaku's, Lexingtons, both which are very, very popular, or if you get your own tier games, you end up against Heroes, Saipans, Rangers, all of these carriers, and all of them tend to be quite popular, and I feel that having defensive AA is more valuable than having Hydroacoustic Surge. Launch some Torps into the smoke, because it looks like he was heading this way. But he might have... did he turn around in the smoke? Oh, he did turn. He actually turned around. Now, I would love to turn left here and shoot him, because the turret traverse isn't that fast and you kind of help it catch up, but I know that he's launched Torps, so of course I turn away. The best case when you DD pops up like this, either you turn away or you turn into them. I was already angled away, so I turned away because that's the shorter turn, but usually want to turn into them. But in this case, yeah, you should see, I launched the Torp. Had I turned left, I would probably be dead. I think I'm going to eat one. Yeah, because I'm sailing away, it's much harder to dodge these. I don't think I'll be able to. No, it doesn't fit. But that's not a problem. This is not a fight he can take regardless, because my gun power is just so much more than his is. Even though our HP after the Torp is fairly even, he can't. He just takes so much more damage than I do from his shells. Also, I'm not certain about his decision to like reverse. Obviously he was expecting my Torps, that's why he stopped or slowed down, but starting to fully reverse just to dodge them, that's a bit extreme. I mean, he should have the maneuverability to dodge them without that. Anyway, secure the kill. I don't think I'll be able to catch up to that New Orleans and get my Kraken, which would be nice considering this is fighting against T8s. Getting Kraken when you're one of the lower tiers is always very satisfying. But regardless, the game ended soon after, and the score is overall quite good. And honestly, getting this much XP is very satisfying in this ship, especially because it has such a bad reputation at this point. And you can see just how much of my damage was HE, and overall a fairly nice chunk of credits as well. Anyway, moving on. Right. As usual, I will be starting with the modules. Now in the Yorck, I actually recommend getting the hull module first, because it just gives you so much stuff, including 5.4k HP, which is honestly surprisingly important because your base HP is so low at 2.7. It also gives rudder shift and AA. Second, you can get the range. The default range of 15.7 is more than enough to deal with at the beginning. Of course, premium repair. You can run Hydra or defensive AA depending on what you feel like. I prefer defensive AA, but Hydra is also a nice choice. Main armaments mod, aiming system mod. Once again, there is the option here to run the AA guns mod instead to increase that range, AA range a bit more. But considering this one, not only are you shooting a lot of long range volleys, for which the reduced dispersion is quite nice, you also have the plus 20% torpedo tubes traverse, which is quite nice since torpedo tubes will be part of your armament all the way to T10. So I prefer aiming system mods 1, but the AA guns mod is once again also an option. A bit of flavor here depending on which one you prefer. Here, same thing, I run steering gears, but as you saw there with the HE destroying the engine, it doesn't mean it's automatically the best option. Propulsion mod 1 might also be a good one. Finally, steering gears, because well, you need to get that rudder shift down to that 6.5 so you can actually dodge stuff. Captain perks wise, basics of survivability, expert marksman for turret traverse, vigilance, and demolition expert, and saving up points for concealment expert. And once I have the 18 points after getting concealment expert, I'll getting superintendent. It's possible I might be speccing out of vigilance and getting superintendent earlier, but I really liked vigilance in the lower tiers with all the torpedo soup. But that remains to be seen in the future. Both are very viable perks. Anyway, that was my Yorck commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.